everyone, welcome to another episode of BFF, a show where two best friends review movies because fan friction. We're your hosts. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Joe.
All right, Joe, so why don't you go ahead and take the lead on this episode since you're the one in the fan friction episode this week.
Correct. I'll be fighting, I believe, Liberty and Randall this week, and we went to a 4-question format, at least for this episode. We're trying it out. And because of the nature of the questions, we had actually remarkably little to actually pull from.
Yeah, when I looked at the questions, of course, I was like, really? Like, I would have been able to pick so many cool things for this episode, so I'm a little sad I'm not fighting.
That's cool. But because of, like I said, because we had so little we had to mess with, there was actually very little that either of us hadn't seen yet.
Yeah.
Between what we had was the television series on Netflix, Daredevil, which remarkably, and I know I'm going to get a lot of flack, we're going to get a lot of flack for this, we haven't seen it yet. But we started watching it, and it's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, and this is something that we would have watched, but we're really...
Possibly.
But like we've talked about before, we're really bad about rewatching things that we've already seen.
We watched Stranger Things twice in 48 hours.
Yeah, so that one we are automatically knocked off the list, and so the only choice that we had...
was Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb.
Yes, and technically I have seen this movie before, but there's a caveat.
Yeah.
I saw this 10 years ago. I picked it as a possible film to review for a project I had for one of my film classes in college. And I fell asleep during the movie because I tried to watch it really late at night. So I really don't remember anything about it other than they were in a war room.
A lot of it, from what I understand.
I think it's in black and white.
As I'm a fan of Stanley Kubrick's work, but this is one of the handful of films of his I have not seen. And it's, I don't know, maybe it's because when it was released and the style of movie and a lot of things combined, just it wasn't on my list of things to watch necessarily. But I am aware that this movie is a thing. Also, I think I get it confused with Eraserhead a lot.
Yeah, because there's a guy on the cover of a lot of the more modern posters that looks kind of like the Eraserhead character, which I think the character on the posters is probably Dr. Strangelove. I literally don't remember. The only thing I really remember about the movie, and not because of the movie viewing itself, but all of the homages to it in pop culture, the guy riding the nuclear bomb like it's a bucking bronco.
Like it's a bronco, yeah. Waving his hat in the air and screaming as he drops, like, woo!
Yeah, like I know they've referenced that at least on The Simpsons and probably half a dozen other things, maybe even more than half a dozen.
This movie also brings a lot of actual historical information I'm aware of into movies about how after World War II, we co-opted a ton of Nazi scientists, rocket scientists, to help with NASA and such. And this movie kind of, from what I am to be aware of, talks about that. I think one of the characters at one point actually talks about the Fuhrer in this war room. So we haven't watched it yet. We're about to. We're just doing the pre-parts. There's not a lot to add to this other than...
Yeah, like the only thing I know, and then looking at the poster, this confirms that, it's a USA versus Russia. A lot of films from the Cold War, Russia is the enemy because in the public eye, in American eyes, that was the enemy. So you see that trend in a lot of films.
It's a clash of ideals. It's capitalism versus communism and things like that.
So yeah, we know that. We know the cowboy riding the
bucking bronco bomb.
Yeah, those are, and then again the guy with the glasses.
Yep.
Not to be confused with the other guy with the glasses on YouTube. Totally different dudes.
Very. But that's pretty much it. Unless you got anything else to add.
Yeah, I don't know why I've never tried to rewatch this movie. I mean, it's like I don't hate Stanley Kubrick by any means. I haven't seen a lot of his movies, but I don't know why I've just never tried to rewatch this. It's his only comedy.
It's his only one that's marketed as a comedy.
Marketed as a comedy.
Actually is a comedy, because there are parts of Clockwork Orange that are disturbingly funny.
Yeah, but that's a discussion for another episode. Yes, this is a comedy, and it seems like it would be kind of like almost like a Mel Brooks kind of thing, just from what I remember.
Just darker.
Just like, darker Mel Brooks, kind of a satirical piece, a satirical look at our world, and that's my favorite kind of film. So, I don't know why I've never watched this before.
Especially because it's early Cold War. That's the thing. The Cold War spanned 20-ish years, 30 years, somewhere in that region.
It
wasn't immediately post World War One.
Yeah,
or two. Yeah, post World War II.
Yeah, post World War II. Yeah, up until the early 90s, actually.
When 91, 92.
Yeah, the wall came down in 89, but there was still some fallout and lingering from that.
But early Cold War and late Cold War are different things, and
this is definitely early Cold War, when people were probably legitimately afraid.
Yeah. Some sort of conflict happening. So anyway, we're going to go watch the movie.
Yeah, so we'll be back in a little bit with our review of the film itself and how well it fits the particular fan fiction question.
Yep.
All right, see y'all in a bit.
Bye.
All right, so again, we just finished watching Dr. Strangelove, and Joe insisted on doing it live.
Yep. Or at least as close as we could, because like I said, had to run a few errands, but I'm not going to worry about changing clothes and showering and cleaning up just for this, because it's organic this way.
Yeah. What were some things that you really liked about it?
It uses some amazing little side notes, like the Coca-Cola machine that says pause and have a Coke. Or pause and enjoy, or something.
Pause and refresh. I think it said pause and refresh.
Pause and refresh.
Yeah,
and,
we'll pull that up.
It's a comment where, like, if anybody in the movie had done that,
yeah,
it would be, everything in the movie would be averted.
So little bit of visual irony over there, even though
that's something that this movie relies heavily on, is irony.
Yes. Some of my favorite pieces of irony, you see this spread throughout the Strategic Air Command's slogan, "Peace is our profession." Mm-hmm. Yet during one point of the movie, there is a literal firefight right outside of the base where General Ripper and
Captain Mandrake,
Captain Mandrake,
or whatever his rank is.
I think it's Captain.
Mandrake.
Yeah, it's Captain.
Okay.
They're
the RAF.
Yeah, they're trapped because clearly Ripper has gone crazy, and is totally crazy.
Yeah.
And so there's this firefight, and they just keep showing these shots. Peace is our profession, and nothing peaceful is happening
in any of the scenes.
What are some other visuals that stood out to you, since you mentioned the visuals?
Every scene of this movie, like literally every scene, takes place in some form of military location. For all of the talk that they have at certain points about the civilian casualties and the way of life and the damage it would do to everyone and everything, you never actually see anything but military bases, airplanes, or the war room. Again, another gag where it's there's no fighting in the war room.
Yeah, I was laughing out loud.
Not a sight gag, but...
Yeah, I forgot about that I knew about that quote, because again, I fell asleep the first time I saw this movie.
That feels like the kind of line Gene Wilder would deliver just...
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yes, yeah, there's no fighting, gentlemen, there's no fighting in the war room, and love that line, great line. Some other irony besides the peace is our profession, and of course that you can't fight in here. This is the war room. Another interesting part to me was they talk about the arms race, the space race, and the peace race between the Americans and Russians, and just the idea that we're in competition to bring the world order together. The challenge of America, the Western world, and then Russia, the Eastern world, communism versus capitalism.
Battle of ideals, battle of countries.
Yeah, battle of ideology and all of that. Who can, bring the world together first. And I know I mentioned in the previous portion of our video about, America versus Russia. And because I didn't remember the film very well, I had just assumed, I guess because I'm a part of the Western world, that, Russia would be the enemy of this. But I think it's very interesting that this all started because an American brigadier general lost his mind and decided to take things into his own hands.
And the president even talks at some point, like, don't we have a process to keep people like this from being in charge, like some sort of screening process or something?
He does mention
that. And he assaults that part. He talks about it. He's like, hey, wasn't the screening process supposed to weed these out? And Turgidson.
That sounds like a South Park character.
Right. Turgensen. That name's going to mess me up this whole video. Turgensen even says, like, sir, that's hardly the fault of the system.
Yeah, if one person gets through,
I don't. It's like basically that's something I found interesting about Turgensen's character is he doesn't seem to understand the seriousness of the situation.
He's very calm.
And it's not even the calm that freaks me out about it. Is he's very aggressive about different things. Like he says at some point, like he's concerned, like World War III is about to happen, right? I mean, they legitimately know that if they don't stop these jets, then they're going to bomb the Russians, and the Russians are going to retaliate with their own nuclear weapons.
Yeah, there's no way they can call off the strike
at that time.
Yeah, because everybody has gone to a system where
they need a 3-letter code
to be able to contact anybody.
Right.
And they don't have the code. Only Ripper has the code, and they can't get a hold of Ripper because the phone lines are messed up.
Right. He's not answering at that point or whatever. So he's concerned about the Russians coming in there, and they don't seem to realize, like, Turgensen doesn't seem to realize that, like, if we don't get help from the Russians to stop this from happening, if we don't contact the Russians and tell them, hey, this might happen, we're not trying to start World War III, we promise.
Yeah.
We need to figure out something to do together, then it's going to start World War III. But Turgensen's more concerned with the big screens and figuring out all of our secrets and our maps and our targets and stuff. In the face of World War III about to happen, when the president's like, hey, wasn't your system supposed to stop this? Turgensen doesn't go like, yes, but that's not what we need to focus on right now. He's just like, sir, that's hardly the fault of the system. Just because one slips through the cracks. One is all it took.
Yeah.
Apparently, one is all it took.
Yeah, another thing that I love in the irony sense, Dr. Strangelove, brilliantly played by Peter Sellers, and he also plays the president, and he is also Captain Mandrake. Yep. Brilliant performance by him, because at first I didn't even realize it. I knew Mandrake was Peter Sellers because it's like, oh, that's the guy from the Pink Panther.
Yeah.
And then I looked online. It's like, oh my gosh, he was those other characters too. That's so awesome because he just really embodies those roles so well, and they're so different from each other.
I remember hearing that he did play 3 roles. I didn't remember which ones they were, and it's awesome. He did a fantastic job.
Yes, and I believe he was nominated for an Oscar for this set of performances.
Yeah, and which brings us to another point. Dr. Strangelove, for being the titular character, doesn't show up until the 51-minute mark.
Yes.
I don't think he's even mentioned until then.
Yeah, I think
this is an hour and 30-minute movie, roughly about hour and 34, something around that time.
Roughly around maybe an hour 36.
It's like an hour and 34, hour and 36. Then that includes like the opening credits and the ending credits, like from beginning to end. It is like an hour and 36 minutes, and we don't even hear the name Dr. Strangelove
until that time.
Until the 51-minute mark, and even then, he probably has the least amount of lines.
Definitely out of all the characters Peter Sellers plays.
So I would love to find out why it was why he was the titular character.
Yes.
If he's not in it until then and all that jazz, then I'm kind of curious. Like, I'm not upset. It's whatever.
Like, I think there were other alternate titles, but maybe that one just sold with the test audience the best.
It's possible. He is definitely one of the more memorable characters and such. So I can see why.
Yeah, very interesting look. Again, looks a lot like the Eraserhead guy. We talked about that earlier.
Because of the crazy hair. It's really just the hair that sells it.
Yeah. Dr. Strangelove at the very end, the irony of, I can walk again! And then the doomsday device goes off and there's nuclear explosions all around the world, set to the song We'll Meet Again.
Don't know how, don't know when, and
we'll meet again some sunny day. I just love that kind of irony where it's the sound against the theme. Like, that's very Russian, actually. Yeah. Eisenstein invented that technique. I can't remember the year, but very Russian technique. I thought that was very cool of Kubrick to
in a movie about the Cold War.
Yes, to use a Russian film technique.
There is something else I about the ending actually that I found interesting is like I am assuming it's supposed to represent the world ending.
Yes.
Like the bombs go off there.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know because it is an older film and the mentality of how to pace and shoot a film was different back then.
Of course.
I don't know if that was just meant to be like a period on the end of the story or if that was to be part of the story. If you know what I mean.
I want to say that that's not how the film originally was supposed to end. When I was doing some research while you were at the store, there was a pie fight that they shot. Remember how they had earlier in the film they had all the desserts?
The big desserts. Yeah, that's right, because the Russian ambassador was making comment on the food that was available. Were the eggs fresh? He needs someone to poach him some eggs and all sorts of other fun stuff.
Yeah, so I heard there was they have a pie fight allegedly. I don't know if this footage has ever been shown anywhere. But like I guess Kubrick, or from what I read, like it felt too farcical to include in a movie that is a dark comedy, but is very serious.
Yes.
So having a pie fight at the end would be kind of like in the end of Blazing Saddles when it literally goes off the rails and like now it's a movie and they're like breaking into other sets.
Yep.
Like that, that kind of button on the end just wouldn't fit. So
right.
Because they're planning to like go to like these. Like to fallout shelters. I know that was a part that you really liked.
Which I was going to talk about. At one point towards the end when they're all like, okay, it's about to happen. There's nothing we can really do to stop it. They're going into contingency plan mode, which is where they're talking about, well, maybe we can get people to safe locations and et cetera, et cetera. When Dr. Strangelove suggests moving people to deep mining shafts so far down that the radiation can't reach it, they'll build nuclear generators to power them, and they'll build greenhouses to create food, and they'll have to be down there about 100 years, and he starts going into this, and I'm just like, holy crap, this is Fallout 3. Because the Vault-Tec program in Fallout 3 was created by a German scientist, and it was meant to not only preserve mankind, but also do social experiments, which seems like something that Dr. Strangelove would do, given free reign over the situation. So it's just interesting. It's the first time that I had heard something, I'm like, that sounds so much like Fallout, it hurts. Right. All
right, so I'll let you give your ranking first because, again, you're the one that has to fight this question and fight the fight in general. So, general out of 10, because we're doing these out of 10 points, like what grade would you give the movie?
I'd give it about a 7.
A 7?
Yeah, about a 7. It's good. I think it does its job. I think for it trying to be a comedy, it's not comedic enough.
Okay.
Even considering the time frame with which it came out, I think the humor has grown better over the years. But taking it into the scope of when the movie was released, I don't think necessarily audiences would have gotten it, if that makes sense. Like the humor, I don't think is necessarily as great at some points for it to be classified as a comedy.
Okay. It's a very dark comedy.
It is. But I mean, a lot of the dark humor, I think, is lost on what we could call a younger audience, a newer audience, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, because it's from 1964.
Exactly. So some of the better comedies that I've ever seen last a long time. Think about like Monty Python. That was in the 70s?
Yes.
The Quest for the Holy Grail. Nowadays is still hilarious. And it's been 30 years roughly. And this was over 40 years ago. It's still fantastic and it's still funny, but I don't think the comedy is as timeless.
Okay.
I think that's the big detracting points for me. For it being a comedy movie, the comedy is not as timeless.
All right.
Make sense?
Yeah, no, I can definitely see where you're coming from. I happen to disagree. I would give it a higher ranking. Definitely not a perfect film, but since I guess I'm more of I wouldn't say like a film snob, but
you have more education.
Yeah, I do have more of a background in film, so I would probably give this at least an 8.5, just because, again, like the construction of the narrative, it is a slower story. I thought the humor was perfectly fine. I've read a lot, so like I got a lot of the jokes, and I love the subtle humor in the background. That is my favorite type of humor. Jokes in the background with all the signage,
yes,
the irony. Especially the phone call, Captain Mandrake trying. There's the absurd situation, absurd humor, satire, which is a straight up satire of the Cold War era fear of what would happen. That's my favorite type, so I definitely would rank this a lot higher than you. Just because that's where my humor comes from.
And see, I understand that.
Yeah.
I agree completely, 100%. But when I was grading it in general, as in if I was to present this to someone else, like this is what I think the general people would agree with.
Okay.
Because I also understand a lot of that humor and get a lot of the humor and approach and appreciate a lot of the humor, but mine is more from a historical standpoint.
Okay.
Like when you were talking about satirizing the Cold War, I'm all over that. I loved. The fact that the whole movie is just like in a 1.5 hour period, they have basically said, this is the Cold War. We are living this right now. It is stupid.
Yes. And for that to come in the early period of the Cold War is very interesting. The Cold War, we were wrong on some of our facts from earlier. Cold War started in 1947.
Yeah, it's right after World War II.
Yeah, because I think you said like hyperbolically it lasted for 20 years. It was a little longer than 20.
Well, it was, but like there were parts of it that weren't nearly as intense.
Yes.
And the
intense part may have been a little shorter.
I want to say the part that people were really paranoid about was like from the 60s to 70s.
Yes.
In that region.
And the 50s especially, the whole duck and cover for nuclear fallout that they trained children to do in elementary schools. The humor definitely kind of sold it a little higher for me. Some of the jokes, and again, it's all very subtle. Again, it's not a perfect film, so that's where I kind of knocked it a few points, especially the ending to me. Like, I know the doomsday device, they can't shut it off, but it just kind of felt... It's kind of tacked on a little bit, so that's where I kind of took some points away. But then, again, we'll meet again some sunny day, and then all of that stock footage of
the different bomb tests.
Yes,
and everything. Yeah,
that's just that's one of my favorite film techniques is sound against theme, because I love seeing the juxtaposition of the visuals and music, and when it's done well, it's so awesome. So that's where it kind of sold me to that 8.5. Definitely not quite enough to be a 9 or a 10 for me.
Yep.
So, I'm sure Randall will do a beautiful job arguing his point, and so will Liberty arguing for her call.
Yep.
But we'll see what happens later.
And we'll see you shortly after.
All right, next time you see us, fan friction will have happened, and I know I'm excited about it, and I'm not even fighting.
I am too.
And I'm not fact-checking or anything, so this is like the easiest job for me for this week. I just had to tell me what we're watching.
Yep.
Hey everyone, we're back, and Fan Friction episode 202 is completed, and so now we're here to talk about... all of that.
Which congrats to Liberty.
Yeah, she did a great job. Totally fierce fighter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you never know what to expect from people you've never met before.
Yep.
So
totally.
I've only had to fight people I've technically met before or know from online. So
yes.
Good job, Joe. I thought you did a great job.
I tried. That's all that matters. I had fun, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, your counterpoints. I could learn a thing or two about how to counteract someone's argument.
I apparently do not have problems with the speed round.
Yeah, you don't have lightning round problems like I do. So if there was ever any fan frictions where like we could tag team or something, like I think we could stand a chance to at least get to the speed round.
But we're getting off topic. So the question that this was for was, what is the best movie phone call? And Randall chose the call between the President of the United States and Premier Kissoff of Russia.
And this was the first phone call.
The first, when the President or the Premier, Prime Minister, President, the leader of Russia
yes,
is
generic.
the most drunk.
Yeah, and you don't ever hear his words of the conversation. Very rarely do you get both sides of the conversation in
any of the phone calls.
I think really only the first phone call.
Yeah, no.
With Mandrake and Ripper, that you hear both sides of that.
Yes, you see and hear both sides.
Yeah, I think that might be the only one that you hear both sides.
But yes.
You can infer that he is super bombed out of his skull.
Yes.
From the way he reacts to everything.
I believe the diplomat even said something about like,
Don't call him
birthday
at
party or something that
or
he's
don't
got,
call him at work. Like, he's probably not at work right now. He's somewhere else. Here, let me give you the phone number for the house he's probably at. So,
Yep.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely a very strange call.
Yes.
But was it
Which
the best call?
Tom pointed out something interesting about the call is all the other generals in the war room were listening in on said phone call. I didn't even think about that during the fight. But it makes it an interesting phone call for sure. But yes.
Was it the best?
Personally, no. That wasn't the best phone call from this movie. If you're trying to argue the best phone call from this movie alone, I would have to give it to when Captain Mandrake of the RAF is trying to get a hold of the President of the United States with the secret code to recall all the bombers. That is my personal favorite call.
Yeah, I would have to agree. As we were watching the movie, of course, we were paying very close attention to every call, as we weren't exactly sure which call Randall was going with, because like we weren't sure if it was the first call or there is another call to the president later on.
Yep.
And then as we were paying attention to each one, when we came across the call from Mandrake to the operator,
to try and get to the president.
Exactly, and it all depended upon the 55 cents that he needed for the call. I mean, like, why would you not choose this call? I mean, clearly the stakes don't get any higher than at that point, because literally he has the codes. He is certain, or, you know, as close as he can be to certain, and everything is hanging in the balance. And then the army captain, who kind of has a name that implies that he's also crazy, like, he won't let him, you know, try to call. And there's that absurd part where, like, just shoot the Coca-Cola machine, and he's like, all right, well, if you're wrong, the Coca-Cola company's gonna be mad at you.
You're gonna have to answer to them.
Yeah, you're gonna have to answer the Coca-Cola company, which is something I know Liberty pointed out as well, is just the absurdity of that. Whereas in the call that Randall chose, the first call to Kisov, the stakes aren't as high because you don't know about the
Doomsday device.
The Doomsday device. And so the stakes are much higher at this point because, like, we know that we can recall those planes. And of course, because of something that happened earlier in the movie, they don't reach the one where Major Kong and his crew are on. And then that leads to the final call in the movie where the president has to call Kissoff and let him know, like, right, hey, we reached the code. They're happy at first, but then they learn, oh no, one of our guys is still out there. If I had to choose between those two calls, I would probably choose the second one to try to argue about, because the stakes are a lot higher. If they're not able to recall that final B-52, then the Doomsday device is going to be set off. If they're not able to
stop it, not even just recall it, because I think even at some point they talk about how Premier Kissov's men have shot down a few of theirs. Mm-hmm. And when they were comparing numbers, that's when they found out there's still one out there.
Yes.
X amount have answered the recall, X amount were shot down, but there's this many out there, and there's
this one rogue plane. And, like, I know at one point the president mentions, like, well, there's no point in getting hysterical. It's like, yes, there is a point about getting hysterical. The world is about to, you know, be totally over with because of the Doomsday device.
Yeah.
And then he explains to him, like, okay, like, you have our permission to shoot down our plane. It's for the greater good.
Yeah, focus. This is probably where they're going. Focus all your forces there.
And that leads to a great moment after the fact where, like, they ask Turgidson, like, hey, you know, what kind of a shot do we have at this? And he just goes on and on about, like, our boys are the best, and they can do all these cool maneuvers, and they're not going to get shot down by any Russian. And then he realizes what he's just said.
There's a moment where he's in the middle of a sentence, and it just stops abruptly, and he's just,
Oh, yeah, like, he realizes that he's making,
he's really removing the hope from the room. He's, like, sucking the air out of the room. But all in all, all the calls are fantastic, to be
Yes.
completely honest.
That's just, and again, it's a fantastic movie, and I know Randall, like you and Liberty, I think just kind of blindsided him with y'all's attack, because y'all both chose
The Mandrake
yeah,
call.
the Mandrake call. Like, look, that is the better call, and like you both talked about the stakes, and he tried, and in the humor of the situation, and Randall had tried to counteract with, well, you know, it doesn't have to be a funny call. Like there's a lot of moments in the movie that aren't laugh out loud funny.
Correct.
And so he was kind of trying to go from a more, like, it's a more serious moment.
But if there's any point of that movie, because this movie is just farce. The whole movie is like farce and
I wouldn't necessarily.
Well, what's the other term I was coming up with?
More satire than farce, because farce goes into a totally ridiculous place. This doesn't go into as many ridiculous places as you might think. It's actually pretty well grounded.
A global doomsday device.
Well, I mean, think about like all the
premier of Russia not sobering up upon the thought of doomsday.
Okay, maybe there are some parts that are a little more farce-ish, I guess. Farcical? I don't know.
Farcical is probably the better word.
I don't know if those are words. I should know these things.
Tell us in the comments.
I teach English, so I should probably know this.
Teach the teacher in the comments. The whole thing is this movie is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous movie. The premise, the fact that they can't stop this from happening, that they don't have more than one failsafe, the fact that the whole reason this whole situation has begun is because the general in charge of the codes is paranoid about fluoride.
Yes, and that was an actual conspiracy theory from that time period.
Sure, but you know who doesn't believe in that conspiracy theory to the point of wiping out the world?
Most people.
The people that are in charge of wiping out the world.
And I think when I was doing some research on this movie, like there were changes made to like what like basically changes were made to prevent something like this from ever happening, where one rogue general
doesn't have all the power.
It does not have Plan R authority.
Yes.
Wait, are there any other phone calls of note that you thought were better than the kiss off call from the beginning of the movie?
The second one. I like the second kiss off call better.
Okay.
But for the reasons we already talked about, it's definitely points out the silliness of the situation on top of the seriousness of the situation. When the president of the United States tells the president of Russia that there's no reason to basically freak out over this.
No reason to get hysterical.
No reason to get hysterical over the end of the world. I would be crying my eyes out. But this is... I would choose that one. But that being said, the one Randall chose was still really good.
Yeah, still really good. Another call that I kind of like a little bit better than the one Randall chose was when Miss Scott is relaying the information to General Turgidson about like basically that Plan R is in effect, and it's just so absurd that she's wearing like a bikini. It's 3 a.m.
She's sunbathing indoors.
It's just very absurd. Her relaying this message of what has to be confidential information. There's no way that she would have the security clearance to be able to know that kind of thing.
Security clearance probably means something else now than it did back then.
Yeah.
So
out of a score of 10, how would you rank the call Randall chose?
Probably about a 7.
A 7?
Yeah, it's still good, but that's the thing. It's hard to choose one from this movie because all the phone calls in this movie were good for different reasons. This is a pretty good movie all in all.
Yeah, so I would have to agree 7 out of 10 again, because there are some calls that I felt were a little better. I think I could argue them better, but I thought Randall did a very good job trying to argue his point, especially against a juggernaut of you and Liberty and the calls that y'all picked.
Double teaming him too, just jumping down his throat. Yeah, first chance we got.
Yeah, and he's a really good fighter.
Felt kind of bad about that, but.
It's fan friction, not fan friends.
There is no mercy in this dojo.
All right, so we asked some of you on Twitter for your thoughts about the best call, so we're going to look at a few of those. All right, so Jason Michael from @film_faculty, he has a great podcast that you guys all should listen to.
Totally check it out.
I'm going to link to that below, and he has a great blog as well about movies, and just a really cool dude.
He chose the same call Randall did.
Yes, and he actually quoted, or he found a quote of the entire exchange.
And it's like a paragraph.
Yeah, and he said, "I'm glad I found this to copy/paste. Would have been long to type. Love this film." Odd Shape Panel at Odd Shape Panel also agreed with Randall that the conference call with Russia is a classic.
Yep.
And then Ryan from at Dunk7309 also agreed that the first call was really good.
So apparently we're in the minority here.
Yeah, I guess we are. Me, you, and Liberty are in the minority.
But yeah, if you guys had a favorite call, leave it in the comments.
Yeah, we want to know, do you agree with us or do you agree with Randall?
Or do you have a completely different take on any of the other phone calls in this movie?
Yeah, we would love to hear your thoughts.
So,
but yeah, I think that about wraps it up for this episode. You guys can tweet at us. I'm at _Mrs. Davis. I almost forgot my own Twitter handle, which is funny.
I'm at Drake Masters. And you can find us on Twitter under those areas and shoot us messages.
We're on Twitter all the time, so feel free to tweet us anytime. We'll respond back to your tweets
as soon as we can. So this has been Joe.
This has been Ashley.
And thank you for joining us on BFF, and we'll see you next time.
Alrighty. And then I have to edit all this together, but whatever.
You'll do fine.
Oh, yes, because, we've already talked for like 40 minutes, and the show's not supposed to be more than probably like 30.
That's fine.